Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. It is finally here, game week for the Tennessee football team. We have made it through the offseason, everyone. We've survived, just a few days away now from seeing the start of Tennessee's season and the start of the SEC season after college football got underway this past weekend. Along with Patrick Brown, I am Ryan Callahan on this edition of the podcast. Noticeably absent, of course, is Ben McKee. And if you have not followed his Twitter account or seen the news on our message board, the checkerboard at GoVols247, Ben is currently battling cancer, and we appreciate Tennessee coach Josh Heupel acknowledging Ben during his comments during Monday's press conference, and really appreciate everyone who has reached out to wish him well so far, and obviously our thoughts and prayers are with Ben and his family. And as Ben has said, his prognosis is good, and it sounds like he is well on his way to kicking cancer's butt. But obviously gotta continue to pray for him and hope that everything goes as smoothly as possible while he deals with everything that goes with that. So obviously we're thinking about him a lot these days, and glad to hear from so many people in the checkerboard family, who some of whom have battled cancer themselves and had so many nice things to say. And it's obviously a disease that so many people are affected by, that we all are touched by that at some point or another. And obviously this one hits close to home here for the GoVols247 family. And Patrick, I know you certainly feel the same way.
Yeah, I would just ask everybody to continue to pray for Ben and his family too. I know he's got a good support system, he's got a good outlook, but it's going to be tough. It's just one of those unfortunate things. But he was on Sunday night asking to help with our coverage of press conference game week stuff. So that tells you where his mindset. He's a go-getter. He wants to be doing his job. I know if when he can't do it, it'll take his mind off his situation. But just keep him and his family in your prayers, and drop him a message either on our board or on social media where you can, because you can't get enough support and encouragement right now.
Absolutely. And yeah, to that point, Patrick, he was talking with us earlier today, trying to see, he's been trying to figure out if he can get to Atlanta for Saturday's game. We've kind of had to tell him, take it easy.
No, no, don't go.
If you need to stay home, and it sounds like you probably do, don't push yourself. So he's gonna be one of those guys. You will still see him around, I'm sure, as much as he is up to it. But if you notice that he felt the need to, I think, address it, knowing that the treatment's going to take a lot out of him, and he won't be able to be a consistent presence around the board and on the site, but he will obviously be still doing some work when he's up to it. So with that being said, a lot to get into, and it's been more than a week since our last podcast, Patrick. So we do have a lot to catch up on, and we'll start with the news that came out actually later the day of our last podcast on the same day, making me look like an idiot in a matter of hours, which is usually not that hard anyway. But I had said on our podcast that I didn't think Tennessee coach Josh Heupel was going to name a starting quarterback until game week, because in the past he hadn't. And boy, was I wrong, because that night he named Joey Aguilar, Tennessee starting quarterback. So not a huge surprise, obviously, not a surprise at all if you followed what we have reported throughout preseason camp. But Patrick, your thoughts on Joey Aguilar officially being Tennessee starting quarterback? And as we sit here now, for more than a week, we've already known that.
Yeah, I think I had a thought that he might have done it Tuesday at his media availability, but obviously he determined that it was done and dusted, and didn't decide to drag it on anymore for much less for us and for fans, but mostly for the team itself. I mean, it had been a steady separation since the early days of camp. I don't know if there was a lot of separation the first few practices, but even going into before the first scrimmage, you could kind of tell that Aguilar was kind of showing up a little bit more. And I do think he got better over the course of preseason camp. I don't think Jake Merklinger had the kind of camp that he probably would have wanted. Certainly he's a young player that's still developing, and we should mention George McIntyre too, because he by all accounts had a great camp, looked really good in both scrimmages, and certainly the coaches were pretty pleased with how he took a jump from the spring to now, and you saw some of his talent flash. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of role George has this season and how they sort of handle that backup job. Josh Heupel said this Monday that You're just gonna have to wait and see the depth chart to see who the backup quarterback was going to be. But yeah, Joey Aguilar. I mean, I think we were pretty adamant throughout the offseason, Ryan, you and I, that and Ben too, that he was going to be the guy, and I think he did what he needed to do. He laid the groundwork when he got here. No nonsense with his work ethic, trying to learn the offense. Was really intentional about building connections with his teammates, and I think he was really. I think he won them over by just working hard and sort of being humble. I mean, this is a guy that's come from, you don't want to say nothing, but just his football journey is really unique. The fact that he was at two different junior colleges, he went to Diablo Valley, and I don't think he even played at City College of San Francisco. I think is the first one. I don't even think he played. He wasn't the starter at starting out at Diablo Valley. He wasn't the starter when he first got to Appalachian State. So he's worked his way up, up, and up. And so he kind of took that, as he said, he's worked for everything. So I think he's taken that into, here at Tennessee, lay the groundwork for what he needed to do in preseason camp, which is go out there and perform and show that you're the guy. And I think he did that, particularly in that second scrimmage. I think the passing game took some steps forward in that setting. And even in the first scrimmage, there were some good things. But I think from that scrimmage to the second one, as Josh Heupel said when he was explaining why Aguilar was the guy, it was just the upward trend. So I'm interested to see how he plays. He's a 24-year-old quarterback that's played a lot, but this is his, he's still a new team and a new system. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes out there and just plays pretty well. I mean, he's just sort of a calm, collected, poised guy that has never really looked like, even when we were out there at practices, never really looked like he was sort of learning on the fly or anything like that. So I think the team believes in him. I think Josh Heupel and the staff believe in him, and they got to go see what he can do for them this fall.
Yeah, I think the key is, I mean, if you were out there at practice every day, I think you would probably get it. I think fans have seen glimpses, they've seen the highlights from practice and stuff like that, but there was something about just the way he carried himself that you often see in veteran quarterbacks. He just kind of looked like the starter from day one, and the way he operated out there and how he's built. It's the way, it's the calmness, the collected way that he kind of carries himself and throws. So I saw someone even pointing out the way the three quarterbacks were holding their bodies as they threw. Aguilar having a more upright stance and sort of this freeze frame look that someone took at it, with the other two quarterbacks, younger guys, obviously, having more of a curve to their bodies as they threw. So everything about just sort of the way he carried himself, I think, kind of played into this and made it an easy decision for Tennessee. But again, like you said, Patrick, I think the key is Jake Merklinger didn't make it much of a competition, and I think it was always going to be on him to fully outplay Joey Aguilar if he was going to win that job, and it just wasn't close to that. So I think smart move by Tennessee to give Aguilar some time to settle in with the offense, develop some chemistry before game week, and that was important because they got the starting receivers, it sounds like, back out in the practice field a little bit more last week. They obviously needed that time after they had some injuries and didn't have their number one guys out there for most of camp. So good timing to name a starter early. I think if there was a year to do it this year, it made sense too. And it certainly squashed any talk of George McIntyre injecting himself into the conversation, because I think some people had started to wonder, at what point do you look at the talented freshman? And Josh Heupel said, nope, not doing that. So we'll see if that comes up again at some point this season. But for now, it's Joey Aguilar's team. And some people have asked me, Patrick, I'd like to know your thoughts too. I think they're going to give Joey Aguilar a pretty long leash. Some people had asked me, if he struggles early, is it a situation where they might go to Merklinger or might go to George McIntyre? I don't think so. I think because the receivers missed some time in camp, and because he's a guy who's only been on campus 3 months, I think Tennessee plans to give him a long runway to figure things out, knowing that he's a guy that's been a 2-year starter and thrown 56 touchdown passes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where some teams, maybe if they have a really close battle. I mean, we're recording this on Monday night. I think Kentucky only settled on Zach Calzada to earlier today. If you have a pretty close quarterback competition, and that's obviously a very different situation because they've got a 7th-year guy and then kind of the future of their program in Cutter Boley. But if you've got a close competition and your starter goes out there and struggles, you may be maybe a little bit more trigger happy to go with the hook and get the other guy in there. I don't think this is that situation. I don't know that it was that situation 4 years ago when Joe Milton got out there. He didn't get benched. He got hurt.
Right.
And that created the situation for Hendon Hooker. So Heupel, and we got to remember he is a former quarterback that has coached the position and played it, pretty much his entire adult life. So who are any of us to question how he handles these things? But like, I think he's going to go out there. He's not going to want his quarterback going out there, A, afraid to make mistakes, or B, kind of looking over his shoulder, right? When we hear that, we heard that from Joey Halzle going into camp that, when you're in a competition, you don't want your guys going out there and, being afraid or being hesitant to make mistakes that would lose them the job. You want them to cut it loose and go play. And I think Heupel and Halzle and the staff are going to want that for Aguilar. So I don't, I would say he's got a pretty long leash. Again, to your point, if Merklinger had made it closer, maybe it's a different conversation, but I just don't think he did. And Aguilar did what he needed to do by all accounts to go out there and prove that he was the guy for this team. And I think he'll get as much time as he needs. If there's multiple games of struggle, then, maybe at one point it's that way. That it was maybe a little bit like that for Milton back in the middle of that 23 season. But then he went and played pretty well against, I think it was Kentucky. So Heupel's going to want his guy to be locked in and play his way. And Aguilar's a guy that's going to play on the edge anyway. So you want him sort of playing that, playing on that edge of reckless and aggressive. So you're not going to do that if you're a quarterback and you're worried that if you make a bad play, you might get a quick hook. So the days of Steve Spurrier, okey doke and rope it open quarterbacks in and out from play to play, that's long gone. It was, again, still fascinating that happened, but Heupel's not going to be that kind of guy. And so I think, like you said, I would agree that Aguilar's got a pretty long leash to go out there and sink or swim and show and work through any kinks that may come in as he's going through these first few games with the new team and a new offense.
Yeah, and more to that point, I think, I kind of reached this conclusion after the David Hobbs injury toward the end of camp, where he's going to miss, it sounds like, multiple games to start the season. You've got Jermod McCoy that we, obviously don't know his status, but no one I've spoken with expects him to play in the first couple of weeks at least. This first stretch of the season, aside from the Georgia game, is set up for Tennessee to have some time to work out the kinks. And so now, as you get back to full strength on the defensive line, as you get back to full strength at cornerback, and as you figure out the passing game, this team's probably going to look better in the fifth game than they do in the first game. So going past the Georgia game, I mean, sure, that's an early big game that you don't want to just chalk up as a loss, but Tennessee doesn't have to win every game to make the playoff. They've just got to get through and lose only a couple. So get through the Georgia game, whatever happens there happens. And then you've got a couple more games on the other side of that, UAB and Mississippi State, even on the road, not the toughest SEC road game, to where you kind of got this easier stretch of the schedule to really ramp up before things get a little more difficult in October. I think at least more difficult consistently. So that's one way of looking at this season. I think you've got some early bumps to kind of navigate with Hobbs out. That shortens your defensive tackle rotation. Obviously, McCoy, maybe your best player on the team, out for at least a couple games. That's something where I think you can be a noticeably different team by the end of September compared to this first game. So if everyone sees some early kinks in the passing game, don't panic. I think this team's going to look a lot better probably a month later as they get everybody back and get that passing game some chemistry. Patrick, the other thing, kind of not related to this team specifically this season, but big news that happened in the last few days, the SEC finally came to a conclusion on what to do about its long-term dilemma they had about scheduling, and they are switching to a 9-game league schedule starting next year. It kind of seemed like this is what needed to happen all along. The SEC just had trouble getting there. But obviously, I think a lot of fans are excited to hear this, especially because it gives us a much better chance of seeing Tennessee, Alabama, and some of those key rivalries, those secondary rivalries, preserved, whereas a format with just one permanent annual opponent would not have preserved a rivalry like that when Alabama-Auburn probably would have gotten precedent over it. So your thoughts on this, Patrick, and what it means for Tennessee?
I would say I'd say some fans are mixed about it because they know
Oh, you
it's
think
about
so?
to get a lot tougher.
Yeah.
And to this point now, a couple things. This is always kind of what I thought it would be. I don't know what the details are going to be, but surely the SEC is going to get a little bit extra cash from ESPN, ABC, other television partners as a part of this for that extra game because you're basically. And I was talking to I think my dad about this, like. You're as a fan, the bang for your buck if you're getting season tickets is you're scrapping uh, who knows what, you're scrapping a group of five MAC game for another SEC heavyweight and potentially. So, and you might get a season of 8 home games with 5 SEC home games. So, yeah, that's good. I think a lot of fans would rather see Tennessee play LSU, Texas, those teams than some of the non-conference opponents that they've run through, the Kent States of the world. I know Ben McKee hates the FCS game, so he's happy to see this change. But yeah, I mean, just to put it in perspective, what a schedule could look like. I think Bill Connolly at ESPN did this. Just hashed out a hypothetical 2026 SEC schedule, and Tennessee's had Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt on the road, and then Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Missouri, and Kentucky at home. And that means the other rotation that Tennessee would play would have Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky, and the rotational opponents would be Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Florida, and Oklahoma, which is a big yikes. But that just illustrates how much more difficult the schedule is going to be moving forward for Tennessee and really the rest of the league, which it's interesting they made this move before there was a sort of a resolution on what the college football playoff format was going to be. I think that was something that a lot of coaches especially probably had questions about because I mean that it's going to be hard for teams to get to 10 and 11 wins with that kind of schedule. Plus you're having to play still a Power 4 non-conference game. So that requirement, some people were acting like that was new. That's not new. That's been in place for a while. That's why when Nebraska canceled on Tennessee, I think that was earlier this year, Tennessee couldn't just go get a MAC team. They couldn't, I think Nebraska replaced the Vols with like Bowling Green and Ball State maybe or something like that. Tennessee couldn't do that. They had to go to get a Power 4 team, so they got Georgia Tech. So and I think that takes the confusion about some of those end of season games, the Georgia Tech, the South Carolina, Clemson, Florida State, takes some of those question marks about how those games, what does the future of those games look like, takes them out of the equation. But yeah, I my big takeaway is that it's going to get a lot harder for Tennessee because you're going now from the last 2 years getting a sort of a friendly rotation, right? We're going to talk about our season predictions here in the next segment, and part of our underlying theme is that the schedule is pretty manageable for Tennessee. It's not going to be manageable anymore moving forward because it's going to be hard no matter who they get. And there's talk. Obviously, they've got to figure out what the 3 permanent rivals are. I mean, it should be a no-brainer for Tennessee, but I know that there's going to be teams hemming and hawing about who gets what. But Tennessee's one of those teams that has a lot of rivals, but they've only played, they've played Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Alabama over 100 times. They haven't played anybody else more than 66 times, which is actually Ole Miss, which is not something that you might think given the SEC East rivalries of late. But it might not turn out that way. There might be, they may get Alabama, Florida, and Vanderbilt. They may get Alabama, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. They'll definitely get Alabama and Vanderbilt. And who'll be the third one? I don't know. I think it's got to be a tough sell. I don't know how much input schools are going to have, but right. I mean, Tennessee is one of Kentucky's biggest games. So, is that really going to be? Is Kentucky going to be okay with that? Might not matter. But you're going to have a lot of people trying to get what's best for themselves. And, I remember, kind of rehashing this stuff from 2 years ago. Nick Saban was complaining about Alabama getting Alabama getting LSU, Auburn, and Tennessee. And he was talking about there was a 10-year metric that they were using and all this stuff. And so everybody's going to be complaining about who they get, who they shouldn't get, who someone else gets. But we'll see how all that comes down. I imagine the SEC will do a big television special at some point, hopefully in December or January after this season, to sort of set the stage for next season. But yeah, it's a big move, and certainly it's going to. There's some good and some bad to it, right? The bad is it's going to get a lot tougher to win a lot of games. And if you go 9-3 in a 9-game SEC schedule, you should be in the playoff, frankly. But how many spots are there going to be? How many automatic qualifying spots? What do they do with conference championship games? There's still a lot of dominoes, I think, to fall, but I think this is a good move. I know, we're all going to get to see a lot more unique matchups. We're going to get to see them more regularly. When you look at, Tennessee, Auburn hasn't played here in 12 years. Tennessee hasn't played at Ole Miss in 11 years. LSU hasn't been in Knoxville. Well, that was 2017, but there's just so long between some of these games being played that, that shouldn't happen. And so I think this move means you're going to get to see everybody more frequently over a 4-year span. You will play everybody home and away, and I think that's a positive for this league.
Yeah, no question. That's the big thing to me is that, like you said, it's been so long since Tennessee and other teams have traveled to some of these places and to to now have a guarantee that you're going to play home and away against everyone in 4 years, that makes it feel much more like a conference. I think there are a lot of recruiting battles that Tennessee has with LSU, and I think in football that almost doesn't feel like a rivalry because they play so
Is that a
infrequently.
Tristan Keys reference there, loosely?
Yeah, just I mean, just a thought. But like Texas
Just
A&M,
coincidence.
yeah. But for years, Texas A&M, Texas, they haven't played Texas yet. I mean, do those teams feel like even conference rivals to Tennessee in football? Probably not fully, not yet, because they haven't played frequently. So yeah, that's going to be a huge change that I think is going to be welcome. And yeah, for fans to have a chance to travel to different places, that's a big plus. And I love seeing the Power Four requirement stay, because that's a question a lot of people had. And like you said, it's going to make it a more NFL-like schedule where it's going to be harder to get to even 10-2. But they got, I guess, enough assurance from the college football playoff committee and the other conferences involved that strength of schedule is going to at least matter enough for them to go down that road. So we'll see how that all plays out. Hopefully they don't go to a 2018 playoff, but that's another discussion for another day. um, and speaking of recruiting battles, there was a big one that did go Tennessee's way just a few days ago. Did want to mention that since we didn't get to do a full podcast on that one, but Tennessee did flip Kamari Blair, the four-star offensive tackle from Kirkwood High School in Clarksville, flipped from South Carolina to Tennessee after picking the Gamecocks over the Vols last month. A big win there for Tennessee, and one that frankly reversed a little quicker than I would have envisioned the day he committed to South Carolina. It's worth noting that he had been set to pick Tennessee just hours before. Really, he woke up the morning of the day he was committing, and was set to pick Tennessee. And then by that afternoon, it had switched. South Carolina made a big late push and was able to land him. And I think there were some things working against Tennessee at times that in that recruitment that the Vols had to overcome. But I think Kamari Blair always liked Tennessee, and so the fact that they were his last offer back in May didn't matter in the end. I think the fact that Tennessee did some things to kind of overcome that deficit they faced earlier in his recruitment, and did some nice things and kind of won him over in the end with his opportunity to stay in state and play at the school that he's liked for years. So nice, really nice win there. I think an underrated prospect still in some people's eyes. Personally, I feel that way, that he's 6'5.5", 285 pounds or so, really lean. Kind of has a look when you see him in person like he's already 23 years old. He's just one of those guys that does not look like a baby face, but he's still very much developing and has gone from 215 to 285 in just a couple years at Kirkwood, which is only a 2-year-old school. So I think a really fascinating prospect, a really nice win in state for Tennessee as they continue to replenish their depth at the tackle position and across the offensive line. That's a pretty nice looking offensive line class that they have so far, and we'll see if they can add anything else to it over the next few months as they look to continue adding a few pieces to their 2026 recruiting class. Tennessee has been kind of going back and forth from inside the top 10 to just outside the top 10. As we sit here right now, I think they're 11th in the 24/7 Sports composite team rankings, but still doing very well. And the addition of Kamari Blair, a huge pickup there before the start of his senior season, which is now underway. And related to that, we'll have plenty to talk about with Tennessee commitments already playing their season openers this past week in many cases, and others to open their seasons here in the coming days. So football season already underway, and we'll have plenty of coverage of all of those guys playing their seasons on GoVols247 as the week continues and in the coming weeks. With that being said, Patrick, we better get to a break. We've got to discuss our own predictions for Tennessee's season that you referenced a minute ago. Maybe a little bit of groupthink involved here. Not a whole lot of variance between between our predictions, but we'll talk about why that might be on the other side of this timeout. Welcome back to the GoVols247 Podcast. Along with Patrick Brown, I'm Ryan Callahan on this edition as we kick off Syracuse week for the Tennessee football team. The Vols getting ready to kick off their season on Saturday in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, and we will be there to provide the coverage later this week and throughout the week, getting you ready for that big game. Tennessee, number 18 in the country to start the season, and a lot of I think people not knowing what to expect about this team, and we'll get to that more in just a second. Before we move on, though, did want to remind everyone, if you don't mind, give us a like and a review, and subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. We would greatly appreciate that. That helps bring us to more people and continue to grow the family. So we would be grateful if you would take the time to do that. And also, if you have not already subscribed to GoVols 24/7, now is the time to do that. Just a few more days to take advantage of our current sale and get 50% off an annual subscription. Absolutely no better time to join with the season getting started right now. So that sale ends later this week. Take advantage of that. A lot of people already have. If you don't want to sign up for the annual subscription, you can do $1 for the first month. And after the first month, you would then be eligible for free Paramount Plus, a huge perk of being a GoVols 24/7 member, especially with the UFC soon headed to Paramount Plus as the exclusive partner for that organization. So great time to join the site, and plenty of football coverage, great stuff on the way throughout the week and throughout football season. With that being said, Patrick, we did run our season predictions on GoVols247.com Monday morning. If you have not already read them, I would encourage you to do so. We will cover a lot of what we discuss in those predictions here in this discussion. But Patrick, kind of to cut to the chase here, we both had them finishing with the same record, right?
Yeah, and so did Ben, who did get submit his in there as well. All of us have Tennessee going 9-3, which it's interesting. The national level expectation is clearly like a step back, right? Tennessee was picked to finish 9th in the SEC. They were the AP poll, they're 24th. You mentioned 18th. That's in the coaches poll, which is, I think that's maybe not not the best barometer of what the maybe national media outlook is for Tennessee.
Coaches are going based on what happened last year.
Right. And so, but you look at some of these metrics, like, we also posted the game by game projections, the win percentages for, from ESPN's Football Power Index, the FPI. And it has Tennessee as a top 10 team. I think 8th, projected win total of 9 games, which is higher than it was last season. So the S&P Plus has them, I think, in the top 15 as well. So
how much is that based on what happened last year, though, and how much is based on the talent on the roster?
Those are a little bit different. I know the FPI, their preseason rankings are based on 4 components, and I'm trying to do this off the top of my head. Some of it is past results with the most recent year. Gets factored in the most, but it's a 4-year sort of snapshot because it sort of just measures how consistent you are if you're up and down. It takes into account returning production, I believe. It values if you have a returning quarterback. It values if I think you have a transfer quarterback with experience, maybe waters down the percentage a little bit, but certainly Joey Aguilar has 24 starts over 2 seasons at Appalachian State to factor in there.
So you're saying in that formula, Tennessee's getting credit for Joey Aguilar, whereas
probably
most people are guessing Tennessee's going to take a step back because of Joey Aguilar.
Right, because apparently they didn't watch Tennessee play last year, where Nico was kind of pedestrian. The nice way to say it is he left a lot of plays out on the field.
Yeah.
That's another discussion for another time, or a discussion that has been had ad nauseum all offseason. But the metrics are still pretty strong in Tennessee's favor. But the national kind of people just seem to be kind of down on Tennessee, or maybe they're up, maybe they're more up on the Floridas and the South Carolinas of the world and the LSUs. And so, even Oklahoma's and Texas A&M are ranked higher. I'm like, Texas A&M's going to go 8-4 because they always go 8-4. Oklahoma has a brutal schedule. They may be better, but it might not show up a whole lot in the win column. Same goes for Florida. They have another brutal schedule too. But it's just interesting. And I think Tennessee, I'm a little bit more 9-3, 8-4 than 10-2. But part of that is just because I'm a cynic, right? I haven't seen Tennessee win in Gainesville since 2003. Tennessee goes to Gainesville and craps down its leg. We've seen this before, so I got to see that to happen. I got to see that happen to believe it's going to happen. It's a little bit like that with Alabama, although I think Tennessee has gone down there and been decently competitive the past 2 times, or the previous 2 trips under Josh Heupel. They ran out of gas in 2021, and 2023 was the second half meltdown. There were some officiating shenanigans down there that maybe don't happen anymore. That Nick Saban's not the coach. We'll see. And then Georgia, they've got to show me they can score more than 17 points against Georgia, much less beating Georgia. But so that's how I got to 9-3. But I do think this team is shaping up to be better than a lot of people think. I think the offensive line, a lot of people seem to be high on inside the program. I like the running backs too. So I think the baseline is this is another team that's really good on defense. I think they have a college football playoff level defense. I do think they have to find some pass rushers. I do think they need to get Jamad McCoy back, as you sort of touched on in the first segment, soonish. Around the start of October, if he's back by then, they need to figure out what Boo Carter is. I know he's been a headache, but he's a very, very talented player that can impact your defense in a positive way. So I think they need all three of those things defensively to play up to their ceiling, but I think their ceiling is pretty close to what it was last season. And so I think this is a team that can run the ball, play defense. I think that gives them a high floor, and then the ceiling is what do they get from Aguilar and these wide receivers that are so unproven.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well said. I wonder if we're thinking about this too. I don't know, almost in too straightforward of a manner, because Tennessee has not done exactly what's been expected every single year. And that'll get more into our game by game projections that we'll also make here in a day or two. But I just don't know. Like, we all kind of, I think that the same three games on Tennessee's schedule are going to be the biggest problem. But Tennessee, each of the last 3 years, has been that team that trips up somewhere along the way that you don't expect. Last year it was Arkansas. The year before, not really a place you don't expect, but they were a favorite going to Florida and still lost on the road. And then in 2022, of course, they squandered their chance to make the college football playoff by losing at South Carolina late in the year. So is there a game like that on the schedule somewhere? You mentioned Oklahoma. That's the other one I think that most people would point to. But is a trip to Mississippi State maybe more dangerous than people are expecting? That's going to be a whiteout game. If that's a night game, the cowbells, maybe that one gets trickier. We'll see. I don't know. Jeff Lebby knows Josh Heupel too. Maybe they put up more of a fight than we were expecting in that game. Maybe Arkansas at home, even though it's at Neyland Stadium, maybe that's still a game Tennessee trips up on somehow. But going to Kentucky, Vanderbilt comes to Knoxville. I don't see an obvious choice, but
Saturday could be tricky.
Yeah, so maybe even Syracuse on Saturday, even though they lose a lot. They've lost a lot from last year, just like Tennessee. But do you think we're maybe giving Tennessee too much the benefit of the doubt in those types of games and just assuming the big three are going to be the problem too much?
Well, I mean, that's certainly a line of thinking that they could pick off one of those three games, but still have the patented clunker. You listed them all out. So, but I just have a hard time seeing Mississippi State being that much better. I mean, they were so bad last season. There's a chance they could be 4-0 going into that game if they can beat Arizona State, but can they beat Southern Miss? They were just so far off the pace last season that it would take a pretty big jump. I don't know that Jeff Lebby is a miracle worker down there, but we'll see. I think this game Saturday is going to be tricky. We'll get into more of a preview, but I mean, Fran Brown's been at Georgia. He's probably got and he's had 8 months to sort of lean back on what Kirby Smart did. He's not going to have the same talent, but he could have the same game plan. So I think that's a tricky game. I think Arkansas will be a revenge game. It'll be South Carolina 2023 all over again. I don't think Tennessee will do that. I also think Diego Pavia has done enough talking that Tennessee, no matter what state they're in at the end of the season, will be ready for that one. We know what happens when Tennessee plays Kentucky. Yes, it's been close up there lately. Oklahoma is the wild card team because that's the team I think that could be drastically improved. I think the Sooners will be good on defense again, and they should be much improved on offense with John Mateer, the gambling man at quarterback. But again, that game's at home. Josh Heupel, he got the emotions out of the way last season, go back to normal. I don't think the players and everybody in that program knows what that game is going to mean to him, and he obviously is super competitive himself. So I just have a hard time seeing him losing to Oklahoma or wanting to lose to Oklahoma. So that's sort of where I got to. But yeah, I mean, this is college football, right, Ryan? We never know. It's so unpredictable. It's so back and forth. I mean, even watching Farmageddon in Ireland the other day, it's like there's just ebbs and flows where a team looks like they look like trash, and then they put some drives together. Then you think a game is swinging away from a team, and then they make a big play. Like, it's just, hey, just buckle up because it's college football. It's why we love it. It's so unexpected because it hardly ever plays out the chalk. We all just pick chalk. So that's just, yeah. I mean, maybe we're not smart, or maybe we should have leaned more on our own experience. But or maybe we just didn't want to get yelled at by some of y'all. Maybe we didn't want to say, hey, yeah, we picked Tennessee to win at Alabama, but we also picked them to lose at home to Oklahoma, or heaven forbid, like Kentucky or Mississippi State or something. So, that maybe that's part of it too.
Well, and I'm a little bit surprised one of us didn't go with 8-4 for the reason you mentioned. So many people are kind of down on Tennessee. I think here locally, we don't get to see much of the team during camp. We get to see less than usual this year. Even the one day that we normally get 8 or 10 periods, we only get to see 6 periods, so no 11 on 11 that day. But what we've heard, it doesn't sound like the passing game has been firing on all cylinders naturally because you've had some guys out. Now, as you said, the second scrimmage looked better, and I think it's a passing game that will get better as the season progresses, maybe. But without knowing what you got there, and with only 3 returning starters on offense, there is some downside. There's just a lot of unknowns about this
Right.
team, and I think the unknowns could be exciting, maybe more so than people outside this state realize. And that's why I, maybe different from you, I lean more toward 10-2 being more likely than 8-4, just because I think this team has a little more exciting talent than a lot of people might realize. We'll see if it's got to come together, though. Travis Smith Jr., Radarius Jackson, those guys have to produce as true freshmen. David Sanders has got to be really good as a true freshman playing right tackle. You've got some big wild cards there, but if they hit on a pretty good rate of those guys, Tennessee could be a lot better team than I think some people are expecting. Whereas outside the state, I feel like a lot of people just think 7-5, 8-4, they're gonna be nothing special without Nico.
Yeah, and the unknowns are also why I'm a little hesitant to go crazy because I mean,
Yeah.
there's a chance all those unknowns could go the wrong way. There's also a chance that you have a couple injuries here and there. We know that's part of the game. Tennessee is thin in some spots. I look at safety, the defensive line. I don't love their depth on the offensive line past the first 6 or 7 guys. What if something happened to Aguilar and they had to figure it out with Merklinger and or McIntyre? I mean, that's a big question. Receiver is a position where they have been a little bit beat up. So that sort of, I don't want to say made me hedge, but that kept me. I'm supposed to be, I guess, the homer on the site, so that kept me from going full homer and being like, 11-1, they're going to win in Tuscaloosa and Gainesville. Like that, I did, all those unknowns. Some of them will probably turn out as a positive, and others will probably be a detriment that keeps this team kind of held back a little bit. But that's the fun of it. And I do want to point out here, like, Josh Heupel on Monday was getting peppered with some questions about how do you feel about this group? How do you feel about this group? A lot of these guys haven't played, and he's like, "Look, you guys haven't seen it, but we've been working with them for a long time. We have a lot of trust in them because we've had a lot of time on task with these guys." So that was interesting to me, and he that sort of exudes to me some confidence what he thinks his football team could do.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth noting. And Tennessee's got, I think, a better running game than people are going to be expecting them to have. I think that group of running backs, Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis, Star Thomas, maybe even DeJuan Morris as a true freshman, could be pretty darn good this year. And it might not have one back piling up the numbers that Dylan Sampson had last year, but it may be really productive again. They're talented at tight end. I like their talent at wide receiver. They just got to stay healthy there. And obviously the big one, Joey Aguilar, has to be good. And that's a tall task to get all those things to fall right. As you said, I'm sure in some areas they will disappoint, and others they might hit and have some better than expected players. But in the end, will it add up to another college football playoff team? I'm not counting on that, but I'm also, I don't know, given the schedule, I'm not ruling it out. But again, you point this out, and it's correct to point this out. To do that, they've got to win at Alabama or win at Florida, and they've not done that since 2003. So can you really count on that? I don't know, but I still just, when I see projections of 10th or 11th in the SEC, I don't see it with this team. But we'll see, and I can't wait for us to all regret our predictions here in the next few weeks as we learn more about this team. We'll actually have a preview of this week's game against Syracuse a little later in the week. Plenty to discuss about this game, but wanted to get our season predictions out of the way since those are already up on the site. For Patrick Brown, I'm Ryan Callahan. That's this edition of the GoVols247 Podcast. We'll be back later this week as we get closer to Tennessee's season opener.